rights. Nobody can, people can, they can oppress you, but they can't take away the right. The right is there. The right is there. The right to people to their land. People can come, they can steal their land, they can take away their land, but it doesn't take away their right to the land, the haqq that they have. There's a right. And that's why, whether you call them Canaanites or Palestinians or whatever you call them, it's their land. They've been there for millennia. This idea that they were conquered. The Arabs came in and conquered. There weren't any Jews in the land. They had completely kicked them all out, the Christians. It's amazing. But this is the thing Nur al-Masalih shows, that Palestine was always a multi-ethnic place. It's never been an ethno-state, ever, in its history. It's always had many peoples coming and going. It's the nature of the place. And so to try to create a ethno-state in a place that never had an ethno-state, it's a bad thing to do. So the haqq it's a right, it's fixed, it's firm. So it's saying, that the threats now is thabat lahum. It doesn't mean that Allah is going to fulfill His threat, because in the Arab tradition, and even in our tradition, if you make a promise to someone and you break it, it's a very negative thing. But if you threaten somebody and then you don't fulfill your threat, it's not seen as a negative thing. You've calmed down, or you've forgiven them. So if Allah makes a threat in the Quran, it doesn't mean that He will necessarily fulfill that threat. But there are a certain group that definitely, because Allah swore an oath that He would fill Jahannam. So then, فَأَفَعِينَ بِالْخَلْقِ الْأَوَّلِ بَلْهُمْ فِي لَبْسٍ مِّنْ خَلْقٍ جَدِيدٍ. Did we tire? Did we weary? Were we incapable of the first creation? So this is a reminder to them. Was the first creation difficult for us? Because if the first creation wasn't difficult for us, why would you think a second time would be difficult? Again, this is a book that calls to people's reason. Now here, after going heaven, earth, what's the next? وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ. And we created the human being. So the heavens, the earth, we created the heavens, we created the earth with all these marvels and wonders. Now look at this last creation. Like, this is all to get us to think, to these people. وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ وَنَعْلَمُ مَا تُوَسْوِسُ بِهِ نَفْسُهُ. We created the human being, and we know what his soul or his ego whispers to him. So the nafs is yourself. And we have this internal dialogue, which is very strange. People say, I need to give myself a good talking to. Like, who are you talking to? Me. Well, who's talking? You. It's a very strange thing. So we have this internal dialogue that's going on. And they're like waves for many people. In fact, some people, it will drive them crazy. You see them sometimes talking to themselves on the streets. I mean, now you can't tell because people have these things in their ears but that if people came from any previous generation and took a walk around Berkeley or any city now in the world, they would think everybody's gone mad because they're all talking to themselves on their phones. But they literally just walking down the street. And now, I used to take, because I walk every day, and I would see people and I'd always, just good afternoon, good evening. They don't hear you anymore. It's really amazing. They said now, like, I think almost half the country is eating alone or something. It's like 35% just eating alone. Even families now don't eat together. And people now, the young people in the cafeterias, they eat and just scroll their phones. They don't sit with other people. These are all really bad signs. So we're told, that here that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what our soul is whispering. So one of the names of Iblis is Waswas. So yuwaswisu fi sudurin nas. And waswasa, the origin of the word, it was the real subtle sound that the jewelry makes, the hilya. It's one of those onomatopoeic words, waswasa, yuwaswisu. Even whisper sounds very similar in English, waswasa. So it's a voice that you can't really hear, but here it means the internal voice. Because it's fi sudurin nas, alladhi yuwaswisu fi sudurin nas min al-jinnati wan nas. Because people will get into you. Like if you listen to the wrong people, their words will get into you. And you'll hear them. So this waswasa, the Prophet ﷺ sought refuge in it. The Quran, one of the last verses in the Quran is to seek refuge from waswasa. And the Prophet ﷺ, it's actually in fiqh, the muwaswis, and it's used in the active voice, even though it's actually there muwaswas, but it's muwaswis. The one who is muwaswis in our tradition has a separate set of fiqh in the sujood al-sahw, right? And what do? They ignore it. Because the way that you increase the waswasa is by giving it some kind of reality. Like if you begin to obsess about it. And one of the ways that Dr. Cleary translated the demons was the obsessors. You know, that's how they work. They make people obsessive about things. Sidi Ahmed Zarruq said waswasa, that the waswasa in wudu is either, he said it's either jahlun bis sunnah or khalalun fil aql. So it's either a mental derangement, which is like what we call OCD, you know, this obsessive compulsive disorder. So Ahmed Zarruq talked about that it's a type of psychological problem. And other scholars mention that also, because obviously these are human problems that existed long before us. Or it was just ignorance of the sunnah, because Shaytan, what they say about the waswasa, and this is very important for people that have, because there might be some people either watching or in this room that have this problem. What's really important to remember is they say al-lus, the thief, la yasraqu min baytin kharib. He doesn't sneak into an empty house, a derelict house. He goes into a house that's full. Shaytan is going to focus more on the people that have piety, and so it's very important to know that oh, am I in wudu? Making these doubts. Malik is I think of the four, if you have doubt about wudu, usually doubt, you know, الشك لا يزول, right? اليقين لا يزول بالشك. But in wudu, Malik has you have to redo your wudu if you doubt the wudu. I mean, there's ahkam to that, but in any case, generally shak is ignored, right? Unless you have some certainty that it happened. So just ignoring shaitan. I mentioned that last time, that Sidi Ahmed Zarruq says that وَمَا يُوَسْوِسُ بِالْإِنسَانُ وَالْقَلْبُ يَأْبَاهُ الْإِيمَانُ, that what you hear in your heart that the heart rejects, that's iman. And the Prophet says sarihul iman, that it's true iman. So not obsessing with this is very important. And the other thing, there's a bab in al-Bukhari which is actually called al-waswasatu fil iman, ma yuwaswisu bihi shaitan liyushakkik fi imanika. So it's what shaitan will tell you to make you doubt your faith. So in that bab, one of the hadiths, which I think is another miracle of the Prophet ﷺ, I mean, there's countless miracles, but he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that shaitan would say to the human being, yasaru, man khalaqa hada, man khalaqa hada, hatta yaqul man khalaqa Allah, who created Allah, right? And there's other riwayas, la yazal an-nas yatasa'alun, people will continue to ask one another, you know, who created this? And wa yuqalu Allah, and it will be said Allah, 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 and then they say, who created Allah? And he said, if you hear that, just don't listen to it. You know, many years ago I was in Morocco, and there was somebody, he was actually working at the gas station, but he was a student at the university, and he told me he was taking philosophy, and the philosophy teacher had asked that question to because this is something you hear in the philosophy departments. Okay, well, so who created God, right? And he asked me that. He said, what's the answer? And I told him that hadith, and he had such relief to hear that. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, you know, he never wavered in that. Whatever he saw that was dangerous for this ummah, he warned us about it. And that's one of the things he warned us, that they're going to ask that question. Because that was not a question of the ancients, it's a question of the moderns. Ancients wouldn't have asked that question. So